Hi everyone. With this particular video, I wanted to analyze the Alien 40th Anniversary short film, Or. This is the first of the short films released thus far that I think merits this type of response from me. I want to watch the film from beginning to end, stopping it to basically discuss why I think it's so much better than the others. I won't necessarily have time to explain all of my reasons, but I'll be able to point out why I think this short film in particular is so good. I'm going to start the video now. Okay. Pausing it here, this is one of the reasons that I really enjoy this particular short film. It begins in outer space, just like Alien does. And you have a drone-like music that's playing in the background while you can see the starscape. You can see the planet from far away. You have a crossfade as the planet gets closer. Now you'll notice that it's getting closer in terms of crossfade because it starts off small. It gets bigger and bigger, but as this is occurring, the camera is also moving slowly towards the planet. You have the traditional intertitles, the explanation of the setting and who's involved. You also have an export, or, right? In the original film, the space truckers on the Nostromo were exporting tons of some type of mineral ore from another world. They were, however, space truckers. In this film, the commodity is also ore, but it's occurring at the mining site. So we have, in effect, space miners, not space truckers. There's enough of a similarity in terms of the setting and the commodity to tie this short film to the original film in terms of that neoliberal attack.
Damn company. What about our lives, you son of a bitch?
I repeat, all other priorities are rescinded.
Big companies can't be trusted, right? But the commodity in either of them wasn't just ore, but other things nearby.
Al, you down here?
I love that transition, right? You have the surface of the planet as it gets closer and closer. Then you have a transition to the surface of the cave wall, which imitates the surface of the planet at a particular distance that once reached, it transitions seamlessly. And the shadows of the cave wall imitate the shadows of, or the lack of light in the vacuum of outer space. So it's a wonderful sort of visual parallel as you transition. And it leads up to that. It gets to a certain point, and then it cuts seamlessly to the cave wall. It's brilliant. It's also a nice little tie-in to Prometheus, or a similar visual motif in that you have the images of the cave paintings and the star systems on the cave wall at the Isle of Skye in Prometheus. But then it cuts to outer space, where you have the star systems, you have the Prometheus, so there's a transition. It goes all the way back to something like 2001: A Space Odyssey, where you have the bone being thrown up into the air by the ape, and then there's a transition or a huge amount of time going by, where the bone is no longer a bone, but it's an object flying through outer space. It's a spacecraft. And in the case of Ridley Scott in Prometheus, he had a transition from the cave to outer space, which is a certain amount of time going by, but also the location. And in this case, you have a similar exchange from one type of scene to the other in a periodic sense, where they kind of shift in ways that remain similar. But there's not so much time going by here as there is a change of scenery that's being emphasized. So as you transition from outer space and the planet, it doesn't necessarily involve a large amount of time going by in the same sense that it did in 2001: A Space Odyssey, or Prometheus, for that matter, because the Isle of Skye scene is strictly in the cave, and then when you go to the Prometheus floating through outer space, all of a sudden, a certain amount of time has gone by, whereas in this case, it's effectively, chronologically speaking, instantaneous. It's an instant sort of transition, if you will. But the image properties are the same. And I like that. It demonstrates good editing technique. And in ways that were executed in similar fashion throughout the rest of the Alien franchise. Okay, you notice here you have a backdrop, right? The walls of the cave. And the way that they are lit, you have background lighting coming from off camera around this blind corner, which generates a silhouette of the cave wall, the cave arch, but also the figure who is a silhouette in front of another silhouette, and he is generating his own light source from his helmet and his flashlight. So there's a lot of lighting photography here that mirrors the same type of photography seen throughout the franchise, but especially the Ridley Scott school of photography that he demonstrated in the first film and that James Cameron imitated in the second film. Those two entries in particular are the most classic examples of what an Alien film is supposed to look like from a photographic standpoint, in terms of, say, terror and horror, how you scare your audience, but how you lead them up to a terrifying or horrifying moment. Prometheus and Alien Covenant, to a certain extent, were much more brightly lit, which made it difficult to hide the creature, but also to announce the environment that the creature is existing inside as atmospheric. There wasn't as much atmosphere in terms of the way that things were lit in a Gothic sense. That type of photography. Note the music here. It's droning, it's ominous. The first thing I thought when I heard it was the trailer for the first 1979 film. It's what you would call sonic ambiance, in the same way that the lighting of the film is lit in such a way conducive to a Gothic atmosphere, while the music is supplemental or supportive of this Gothic aim to make you feel as though you're inside a haunted house. A haunted house isn't just lit, but often occurs in real time through music as a character or a participant walks through that location. Also, tangentially, the use of music in ghost stories is diegetic. In this case, it's not diegetic, but is provided to support a similar aim. I like this crescendo, right? The heartbeat, but also the camera slowly leading up to the face of the man, who, up until this point, we couldn't actually see his face. Now it's revealed in a way cleverly done, because we only see the foot of the man lying on the ground, so the expression of the man looking at him and the music and the lighting and all of this has to convey what we cannot see ourselves. When he turns and runs away, the flashlight blurs across the screen, and then it's effectively a cut to black. It's a shot that's very reminiscent to, say, Windows in John Carpenter's The Thing. When Bennings is attacked by the Thing, Windows walks inside, and we can hear him breathing, and we can hear the background noises. But for the most part, in that scene, we can't see what Windows is seeing, and then he turns and runs away. Now, there is a quick shot in that particular movie of what he sees, but they very easily could have cut it out, and the effect would have been the same as it occurs here in this short film. So Alien, as the franchise title, appears in a single word, or appears sequentially or individually out of the darkness. It's a nice touch. It's a little bit different, but I can recognize the pattern. The music is great here. And then that rise, right? That musical rise, and then it gets louder and louder, and then you have a sudden sharp cut. In Alien or Aliens, you would have certain shots that would occur where nothing is happening, or that they're darkly lit, or they're outside, say, the Nostromo when they're doing repairs, and the atmosphere is very loud, almost deafening, and then it gets louder and louder, and then it transitions to the inside of the spacecraft, and all of the crew are just kind of sitting around waiting. Here, a very similar kind of transition where there's a musical crescendo, there's mostly darkness, and then suddenly you're at Bowen's Landing. That sign with the Weyland-Yutani logo, I like the fact that they have the population number, but they've crossed it off with spray paint. But now it says 312, which seems to imply that the company doesn't care enough to replace the sign on a regular basis. And since the population has gone up, instead of it going down due to some type of accident, we learn that certain members of this space mining facility are women and that they give birth. So that causes the population to rise, and they can't necessarily leave here, which we'll find out in a moment. Also, the shot kind of reminds me of Hadley's Hope, where you have that building, the establishing shot, and it's surrounded by storm-like mist in a way that existed on Hadley's Hope with the atmosphere of the planetoid after the processor had been built. And I can't tell for sure, but I have to think that those red lights in the background here and here and here and here are attached to an atmospheric processor, the likes of which we see in Aliens. So I like that. That's good. Also, before I continue, they are isolated, and they're there for certain concerns that are corporate in nature. So they're brought out here for reasons that are business-like in nature, because no one would voluntarily go to a place like this, a desolate location. But these people are here for a very specific reason. Money, in the same sense that the space truckers were, or the scientists in John Carpenter's The Thing.
They're gonna freeze off. What? My nuts!
The noise of the scenery is such that when characters are trying to have a conversation, they have to speak up or repeat themselves.
What?
Why don't you just fuck off?
What? What'd you say, Rick?
Similar kind of thing here. The context is slightly different, but it's a similar idea. The environment is dark, it's isolating, and it makes communicating difficult in various ways at different registers.
I think they might actually freeze off this time.
Yes. The way this scene is framed, but also shot in terms of the lighting in the background shining through. You have a character, a silhouette of a character moving, but you have these characters in a locker room type situation like in Aliens.
Come on, stay on your feet. Yeah, 3 weeks in the back, girl. Come on.
Talking about breeze and not this movie shit.
Yeah, tough. How about it?
Where, again, they're just going about their day in a way that you don't necessarily see in Aliens, because in Aliens, when they wake up from their pods, it cuts from the pods themselves to the breakfast table after they're dressed. Here, not so, though it's inverted because they're out from the cold and they're changing into their fatigues. Also, you have the chains hanging, so you have this wonderful beam of light hanging down from the ceiling, but then you have these hanging chains that are not just visual, but you can hear them rattling as well, which imitates the room of chains in Alien. So you have this sort of amalgam of different textual elements that are coming together to create a collage which is recognized within the franchise that it borrows from, but it also feels like its unique sort of iteration of all of these individual components. It's perfect. They've really studied it. And some of the other short films didn't take as much time as they could have to have shots like this that are occurring as part of the action on screen. As they enter, you can hear the wind from outside slowly fading and the sound of the conversation, of the chains, of the indoor sounds taking over. But that they're not completely separate. Even though the image cut from outside to inside is immediate, the sounds carry over. In sort of a liquidy kind of way.
Hey, Martin, you survive?
Still hanging in there. Thanks for checking, Lorraine.
Note the cat on the locker reminds me of the images in Aliens with the locker door hanging open and they have the nude magazine because it was a man's locker in that type of situation. But this character here is a woman, but not only that, a mother, but also a grandmother. And the pictures that she has on her locker are quite different from the images on Parker's stall or Hudson's locker. There are no nude magazines. It's an image of a cat, which sort of ties her into the maternal appreciations of Ripley, but also images of her children.
No way you're gonna lose them on our watch. Naomi wants more kids.
Hey.
Even though she's an employee working for the company as a space miner, we learn that this colony is a place where the miners exist. It's a mining town or a mining community, the likes of which in real life might occur in West Virginia with the coal mines. So it's illustrating that particular facet of corporate cause and effect. This situation is parallel to real-life equivalents.
I hear you've got another grandkid on the way. Congrats.
Yeah. Some nuts could do with freezing off. When we find that new deposit...
If we do.
I love the pacing of the dialogue in this sequence. You have different moments where characters are talking. You have background characters who are literally secondary or background. You have the character in the front here who takes up more of the frame and is talking while these different things are occurring in kind of a natural way. As in Alien, where the breakfast sequence and the camera was sort of rotating, when it came turn for a character to talk, the camera would sort of focus on them and they would take up more of the shot.
Still with us, Brett? Anything so bad, man?
Right.
Yeah. Oh, I feel dead. Anybody ever tell you look dead, man?
Their face would take up more of the frame, and it could be a portrait shot or it could be a mid shot like this. But it's constructed in such a way that it's very obvious who the focus is. Also, she's in focus, and these characters are not in the background. And even though there are characters moving back and forth in front of her, our attention is largely on her or the other people who are talking in turn. Like, it's very nicely edited in terms of a conversation.
We will. And when we get that bonus, I'm getting Anna and those kids off this rock.
So we have the predicament, right? She's a miner, and they're all kind of stuck on this rock. But they're stuck out of financial obligations. They're not doing it because they love it. They're doing it because they're getting paid. And that's why they're going into this horrendous situation. They're doing it because of their families. Her motivations, though, are different than Parker's. Parker, an alien, just wants to get home and party. That reoccurring theme of the bonus situation is different when told through the point of view of a grandmother. She wants to find that discovery down below to mine deeper to get the bonus so that they can get the hell out of here.
You're gonna get something better out of this life.
The editing, again, where she shuts the locker and then it cuts immediately to this, and the sound of the locker door shutting overlaps with the pressing of the buzzer. It's good editing, the type which would occur in Alien or Aliens, any movie in the franchise that took the time to really develop it. And I thought some of the other shorts up to this point really didn't have that. In this, we've already had a wonderful sense of establishment of what's going on and where, and a sense of build-up and these different sort of considerations in terms of plot dialogue, but also the way that they transition from scene to scene visually and orally to maintain a feeling of being within a franchise. Textually and thematically, it's great stuff. The clocking in, as it were, reminiscent of Dallas in Alien, with these big sort of clunky punch cards. There's a retro future aesthetic with the plastic, and the indicator lights is appearing as though they would, industrially speaking, note the industrial sort of black and yellow stripes here, as on a mining colony. It's not going to be pretty. So it's a difference between, say, Prometheus, which was a flagship of which Wayland was secreted away on, and Alien, which was a space trucker outfit that, even though it may seem like backwards in terms of the technology, that type of thing would occur if there isn't a corporate executive on board. And these people are all expendable, and the technology reflects that as something oppressive, something run down. We have a CRT monitor here, but you also have stick-it notes that are written. It's analog technology that mirrors shots from the original film. Also note the lens flare here, which is reflected on the screen. So this is an actual monitor with an image where the light from the off-screen source is appearing in the glow, the lens flare, but also the glare on the screen itself. Note the shadows on the paper here. This is a wonderful replication of that sort of retro future aesthetic, but also just the plastic reality of movies that were made in production, not post-production, but photographed or filmed in real time. There's so many effects nowadays that are blue screen, and that plastic reality, or the act of, say, taking things that are physical or analog, not just in terms of their function, like a computer screen, but the way that they serve as materials to be viewed and how they are captured on screen. Also, you have the voices of the characters themselves are shrunk by the fact that they're being played through the speakers of this monitor, the discoloration and the film grain of the image itself. I can't really tell if there's a lot of film grain, but in any case, the image resolution and quality is lower than the world itself. It's not being presented through the monitor. So that's another theme that was explored in Alien and Aliens. And the Marines explore the atmospheric processor. There's interference from the structure.
Your transmission's showing a lot of breakup.
Probably getting some interference from the structure.
But also just from the fact that these are CRT monitors. Same idea with Aliens when they get closer to the ship, or in this case, when they go down. It's being viewed through these cameras that are just sort of shoddy.
Why always last?
Any bets on if they found the deposit today?
That sound of the bell as they're taking the elevator, the express elevator, to hell, going down, kind of reminds me of the ringing of the bell in Alien Covenant. The lighting here is pretty good, and there is dialogue that's occurring as they're getting on the elevator, where he says, "Why am I always the last one?" There's a little story that's told. It's not just banter, but you can gather that they've done this multiple times. There's a history between these guys, a camaraderie, if you will. They're all worn down. And there are so many little details. There's a binder here that has probably some type of rule book. Maybe it's the computer, I can't tell. It could be the mainframe or the processor. But then you have this hanging wire, which would be attached to a headset of some kind or a radio. You see this in Aliens when they're landing. You also see it in Alien Covenant. So this type of material is a part of what you're viewing. Also, I just noticed this is the elevator capsule here, this cube on the right side of the monitor with these dots inside. They also kind of look like targets, right? In Alien or Aliens, the dots on the screen are represented in sort of a primitive digital way that makes it appear like a target in a video game, like Pac-Man, right? As the alien is moving towards Dallas, it's Pac-Man and it's going to gobble him up. So it's just wonderful attention to detail here. The camera pulls back, and we have this woman who's acting as a mediator, right? While these characters are in a dangerous situation, she's sitting pretty. This guy here is sleeping, which adds to sort of a comic relief moment, but she's not alone by herself at this moment. Also note the photography here. While he's sleeping, the beams of light travel through the space between the two monitors here. You have the dippy bird. Also, you have a dog. You have the shadows from these different light sources from this monitor here. The screen of this monitor is hidden, but you can see the light sources. So there's a lot of attention to detail in terms of the set itself. There's a lot going on.
Sorry.
Here, they're transitioning, right? They're transitioning from the safety of the above ground to the subterranean depths. But the camera is actually behind a grate which is out of focus and only appears visually for the most part when the lights of the different level indicators appear as the elevator is moving down. It's a lovely visual trick. So for the most part, you can see the characters, but again, the environment is oppressive, not just sonically from the sound of the elevator, but photologically in terms of the light that's being photographed as appearing in front of the viewer as they go further and further down. You can count it in ways that appear visually, but also don't interrupt the dialogue too much. You can still, for the most part, see the actress's face here. This guy. And it's framed, too. She's the focus. And they all kind of operate around her, and then you have this dark space of what she has to face, right? The imagery and the lighting and the visual and the audio elements is sort of bleeding into the frame as well.
Left with the others.
You could afford to?
More dialogue discussing why they're here and potentially why the company may be pulling out at this point. So they're all basically sweating the details of their job, but also the situation in which their job is a part of.
All right, first round's on Clark.
Yeah. Laugh now.
I like the dialogue, too, because it depicts a sense of camaraderie between these different people. They're all basically joking amongst themselves as they're preparing to land, or in this case, enter the mining level itself. They're just going to work, but they're talking in a way that makes you feel as though there's a sense of camaraderie.
If the company pulls out, the colony's screwed.
They won't leave. Unless the mine's dry for sure, right, Hanks?
I love that lighting, though. You can see as they're talking. Like, actual light is appearing through these grates on the wall as they're talking. Since she's the one who's conversing, the camera focuses on her, not on the main character or this person in the background. But they all kind of bleed together as a collage.
Right.
You have the mediator in this situation wearing a headset. Again, look at this really intense lighting, or this light source here. But just look at the photography here, the rim lighting on the side of her face or the back of her head from these light sources in the background. And there's a lot of them. The green text on the monitor reminds me of the green font that you see on the screen when Ripley is being interrogated, or when the life capsules and aliens on board the Sulaco activate. You can see this scrolling sort of text. That's definitely a visual trope from that period. But also the franchise itself.
Need to search deeper.
Search deeper. I love the what's being communicated here. You can see all of the names of the employees. Status in. This is when they punched in. All at basically the same time. Though it seems as though it actually goes down by number because they were punching in a line. So you can actually see that in the data itself. It says engaged, so the elevator, instead of the cube with the bullseyes, you have this sort of series of grids or rectangles with them on it. It's just a cool kind of way. Note the the crosses here in the four corners, or the three corners, and then you have this diagram here.
Where's Al?
He didn't clock out after a double shift. Not the first time he's tried to sneak a triple. I've sent Colton to get him.
So we have dialogue that's explaining, okay, Colton must be that guy at the start that we saw. Though he was sort of isolated from his peers, he wasn't able to communicate to them for some reason. So when they go down below, they're effectively cut off to a certain degree, and the only way that they can communicate is through this station, this elevator. So while they're in it, they have communication with her, but it seems as though that is somewhat limited when they're underground, when they're in that dangerous territory. I didn't have a chance to point it out when it happened, but if you look at the small corner of the screen on the CRT monitor here that shows the characters while they're inside the elevator, when they first get into the elevator and it's stationary, they're just sort of crammed in like sardines. But as the elevator's going down and you can see the light passing through the grates from moment to moment, you can see that on the screen. So there's different footage to accommodate for different points in the conversation depending on where they are. Like, there's a wonderful sense of continuity here.
You guys have to take care of yourselves, okay? It's not safe to push yourself so hard.
2 days, Al. I mean, I want that bonus too, but fuck.
Yeah, here you can see the light that's passing through the grates on their faces. And this isn't done in post. This is done while they're being filmed and then put onto a monitor, which is a wonderful nod to the types of photography that they would have. Say the derelict was filmed on a camcorder and then filmed through a CRT monitor, and then you would film that with a camera.
Let's get out of here.
We've got this far, we must go on. We have to go on.
So cameras filming cameras, basically. And here, same idea. They're being filmed on this camera, which displays on a screen, which is then filmed by another camera. It's something that they really make great use of in Alien, and Aliens, and here as well. The white fluid from her flask or thermos, if you're paying attention, this is similar to the white substance that Ash drinks in Aliens. And at this point, we don't know that she is a android, right? She's a goddamn robot. Well, we don't necessarily know that. But there are little things that if you pay attention, you might be able to catch in the moment. And once you learn that she's an android, you realize that her role in this situation is very similar to Ash's role in Alien. In this, she is the mediator that is communicating to the crew while they're in the elevator, whereas Ash was communicating to Dallas, Lambert, and Kane when they were approaching the derelict. Also, just notice the props here, the folders or the folios. You have this lid from her thermos, and then you also have other props in the background that are out of focus, nicely populated with different props that kind of tell their own little story, and they're photographed really well. But they also have little clues that impart things that are similar but different to other films in the franchise. So you try and predict what's going on, but you may or may not be right. Also, if you listen to the background, you can hear computer sound effects that were borrowed from the original film. They've used the same sound effects here, recycled. There's a loud transition as they prepare to leave the elevator. She puts on her helmet, kind of like the Colonial Marines when they get ready to go out into the dangerous unknown.
Get on the running line! Yo!
Here, same idea. The hero goes first. They use the action of the scene to communicate things without stopping anything. They're proceeding into the mine, and she's saying hi to people as she passes them, and then she spots her daughter.
My banana.
My banana. And you look at her and she's visually tired, right? She's been in the mine all day. She's exhausted. So there's a familial relationship between mother and daughter. And I like that because that type of relationship wasn't strictly biological in Alien because Ripley's daughter wasn't present. They were all just corporate employees. In Aliens, there was a surrogate relationship between Ripley and Newt. But in this, it's an actual mother and daughter. But in this case, grandmother and mother, grandmother, daughter, granddaughters. And that's kind of cool. It hasn't really been something that I've seen explored, per se, in an Alien film. It's done expeditiously in this case. It occurs in a way that doesn't interrupt the pacing or the flow.
So, she's in bed, but she won't go to sleep until she gets a kiss from her mom.
Takes after me.
Yep. Come on. Good night.
Notice the behavior between her and her daughter is very different from the guys. The guys are just kind of rough and tumble. They keep their heads down. They do their jobs. But with her, it reminds me of Alien Covenant, where the characters have skin in the game more so than just the bonus situation. Here, it surrounds them as relatives, like they're an actual family underground. And in Alien Covenant, they were a cargo of couples in a proverbial Noah's Ark in outer space. So this is just another iteration of that, but I think it's done pretty well because it gives us, as an audience, vicarious skin in the game. We can identify with them as having parents, and we could probably look back on our own lives and think, okay, that's what a mother is like in any situation, it would seem. That theme of the protective mother that's going to look after us no matter what. That was explored in Alien with Ripley and the cat, in Alien with Ripley and Newt, and here with the protagonist and her daughter, but also her granddaughters.
Love you and a banana.
Love you, Mama Goat.
I love this shot. Photographically really nicely done. Notice that half of her face is in shadow. You can see certain portrait shots in Alien or Aliens that occur in a very similar way. Sort of, it's thrown into relief, the light from the right side and the darkness from the left. It's a very striking image. Also, the music is occurring all around them, sort of a low drone that never stops. And the light from overhead from her helmet, even though it's off screen, bleeds into the frame. So there are all these external sources that peripherally occur in ways that add to the atmosphere of things, and that become a part of the image on the surface of the character's face. It's very Gothic. Also, when she turns her head, you can see that smoke in the air. So they knew that when they were filming that, there would have to be enough smoke in the air so that when she turns her head on frame, that those beams of light would capture the dust in the air. It's very nicely done.
It's Al. He's in tunnel. I went to him, but Al, he's...
This is probably the one moment where I laughed out loud when I first saw this. Was I thought to myself, do your job, and it seems like this guy falls somewhat short in terms of what he's supposed to do. It's like, you have one job. It reminds me of Harry Dean Stanton as Brett in Alien, where he picks up the skin of the facehugger, but it doesn't register on his face, the sense of fear. And in the same sense here, this guy just strikes me as kind of dumb. Why didn't he radio ahead? Maybe he didn't have the equipment with him, but if that's the case, why? And he's just sort of dim. Maybe that's intentional. But in terms of what he's delivering and how she's responding to it, her reaction seems a little bit more believable. But there are dim people. I mean, Brett as a character is kind of dumb. And he's the one who, sort of makes the discovery and pays the price. And in this case, this guy's a similar kind of character. But notice here, we're only 3.5 minutes in, but we already know who she is. We have a feeling of this guy as well. They've interacted, and she's interacted. They've had conversations from the surface to where they are presently. So there's already a sense of camaraderie between them. We know that he's getting ready to leave. She has certain opinions about her as a grandmother. And then there's this guy who just sort of wanders in from the cold. So we already can kind of say certain things about them as characters. Yeah, they're cutouts. There's not really a lot to them, but in terms of the amount of time that the film has had to sort of portray them on screen, it's done a nice job conveying enough information about them so that we can tell them apart in only 3.5 minutes. That's really nicely done. Also, this green shirt that this guy's wearing, it's a similar tone to that of Dallas, but there's something else about it that I'll point out in just a moment.
Just come.
I like the music here. It really reminds me of Jerry Goldsmith's Freud music that plays during certain scenes in Alien. That pizzicato of the strings that are plucking in a way that sort of reverberates or carries. This is a workstation, authorized personnel only, and she pulls something out of it, and we see that that's a camera. Now, she had one, and the other guy didn't, and if he did, he may have been able to communicate the message to them, or to communicate it to Ash, or the Ash-like character, the android, and then that person would communicate it to them while they're in the elevator. So there's a wonderful sense of disconnect with the technology, their lifeline, as it were. But we'll see very shortly that that lifeline is not only technologically unreliable, it's perfidious.
Thanks.
I like that. It transitions from putting on the device, and when she wears it and activates it, then this monitor comes to life.
Thanks, this thing working?
Here, how can I help?
Her name is Hicks as well. It's the help, right? The person that you call when there's a problem. But how helpful is she going to be? Well, as we see in a moment, not very.
I think there's been an accident.
Copy. Putting med stuff on standby.
This is a nice little transition. What you're seeing strictly through the monitor, but through the camera before it's played through the monitor, if that makes any sense. I really love the set here. This is a real tunnel, and you can see the tracks for a mining shaft, and these walls, they look like they're made out of real stone. It might not be the case, but the length of this tunnel does not appear to be that of mirrors. Now, this could be a post-production effect, of course, but it looks great. It seems to stretch on forever. I know that in Alien they used mirrors to extend the distance of the tunnels inside the Nostromo.
Our time is their time, that's the way they see it.
No, but
Same old shit, man.
But I think I know why they don't come down here. It's because of you. You don't have no personality.
And in Aliens, they did a similar technique during the life pod sequence when the Marines are waking up. For all I know, this could be an actual mine shaft that they commandeered. Also, if you look at the lights on the ceiling here, but furthermore back here, direct your attention to those. They resemble the lights on the bottom of the Nostromo after it's landed. They're blurry, they're surrounded by darkness, and you have this negative space that's filled with light off screen. It's very similar, except it's occurring inside a tunnel. Wonderful photography. You have the lights of their camera device here, but also their helmets and this flashlight, and it's all photographed in real time, and it looks fabulous.
Here.
Okay, so now we have a visual coda where these characters are emerging through the doorway here that the character in front initially walked through. And note again, just the detail of the arch itself as a sort of a positive space that's acting as a silhouette, but then as the light shines through, look at this wall. The detail is great. I wanted to rewind that a little bit because look at this, the silhouettes, right? There's a certain promo image of Alien the three explorers in their spacesuits, and they're kind of standing and they're sort of moving in place. And here, if you freeze this image, you have a similar kind of situation where you have these characters that are kind of looking over their shoulders, or they're looking in front of them. They're looking at different directions in their silhouettes. It's a wonderful sort of visual parallel. But also, just look at how this is photographed in terms of this light coming from her flashlight. The way that it catches sort of that cone from the flashlight, the glow, the direct beam itself that's shining on the figure lying on the ground. It's wonderfully done. Much more so than in some of the other shorts where everything is brightly lit, so you don't have a sense of control over the atmosphere of things photologically. What's being photographed in terms of the light and shadows, if it's all just light and you see what's in front of you, you can't really paint a picture the way that they do here. But there's also another very important thing. You can't hide things especially well, and that's something that's going to become immediately apparent in just a moment. Okay, this here, I just wanted to stop this and point this out. As far as I know, this logo is actually taken from the Aspen beer cans that the Nostromo crew drank, but instead of being on a beer can, it's on a t-shirt. I like that instant sort of transition. We don't see it through her eyes. We see it through the monitor.
Hanks, it doesn't look like an accident caused by machinery.
Bring me closer, please.
I love this. To bring the image closer to her, they have to physically get closer to it. And she doesn't really seem too worried about that. Also, I love the detail of this, whatever it is. It's very retro looking. You have almost a circuit board of sorts, but also a punch interface, punch buttons. It's off to the side, but it looks nice. And again, just the photography here is very nicely done.
Does it? It looks like the wound came from inside.
Now here we have sort of a variation on the same type of foreshadowing that you have in Alien, but the circumstances for it are radically different. Instead of the space jockey, which is fossilized, right? It's growing out of the chair. Here we have a human, one of them. Kind of reminds me of Predator when they find Jesse Ventura's character after he's been killed by the shoulder cannon, and they're trying to discuss what happened. And even looking at it, they can, even though they're not like medically trained, they try and guess what could have caused the injury. I love her reaction. You can notice the little eye twitch. And her eyebrows kind of raise as she finds out certain information. She's using them to gather information about this individual, but also what caused it. And there's a very specific reason for that.
Yes, like something ripped out from inside him.
What do you mean?
It seems like her affect might be kind of flat, but in Alien, Ash's affect during certain scenes, like when Dallas and company are going inside the spacecraft, there's a shot in the theatrical cut of that film where his face is kind of blank. And it's sort of a giveaway. And they decided to keep that here when she's talking to them.
Something.
Oh, I love that. The way that certain characters look up, these characters look down, and they're looking around them. And the reason they're doing that is because everything is dark. They can't pinpoint where the danger is at this point. And that's a very key difference between a movie like this versus, say, Prometheus or Alien Covenant, where the danger is just right in front of you for the most part. Wonderful photography here as well. Now, you have the musical crescendo as the camera slowly pans to the right as the characters are walking towards it. It's all done in one take. There are no cuts here, and that's somewhat of an older technique, I think, in a lot of modern films. I get really annoyed by the fact that you don't have single take scenes like this. Now here, I did think it was a little bit almost pedestrian for them to have the eggs just sort of sitting here. They're not in a temple. They're not in the hold of a derelict craft. They're just sitting here in this shaft. But then I thought they were most likely planted by the company, right? Now, why would the company do this? Well, they have to introduce this egg to someone, and the people that they're going to have access to are members of the company, the expendable crew, as it were. They can make it look like an accident on site, and they're pulling out, as it were, so if there was an accident and there was some type of containment breach, they can make up any story they wanted after the fact. So they place these eggs here, hoping that someone is dumb enough to walk up to them and be impregnated, like the person on the ground was. So that's why the eggs are just kind of sitting here like they are. And it might be kind of disappointing in terms of, well, I wanted it to be in an alien temple, like Prometheus. Now, in Prometheus' case, it was a nice touch because it wasn't a temple, it was a ship, but it has temple-like qualities. Well, I wanted something similar here, but they're already stretching the budget in terms of the set that they're on. I can understand why they didn't do that. They had certain technological limitations, but they presented in a way that it may seem odd at first, but it actually kind of makes sense in terms of the corporate agenda. They're going to have the accident or the inoculation of the alien parasite into its host occur in a way that for them is how they normally operate as sort of a parasitic company anyways. It makes sense. The eggs themselves don't look especially great, I think, compared to, say, an Alien Covenant, when Orem is walking through the nursery, as it were, and you can see the eggs. I think the technology used in that film produced a better final product. Here, the lips of the eggs themselves, they just look a little bit flabby and burnt, but overall, it could be worse.
One's open.
Look at this shot. This is great. You'll notice that the way that this egg is shot, the shortcomings that I mentioned a second ago don't matter because it's a silhouette, and you have the sparkling of the rim lighting on the lip of the egg. The slime, it reminds me of the derelict craft in Alien when Dallas and company are inside, and the lights of their suits, or in this case the flashlights from the miners, are producing this glistening sparkle effect that makes it look not like a prop in a set, like it looks wonderful. This is fabulous. It's the same school of photography, and more importantly, the same desired result.
Something came out of that?
Killed Al?
So that's the guy's name on the ground. Al, evidently. And here there's some type of weapon on the ground. Al's, evidently.
We have to blast them.
No, Lorraine, leave them.
Now, here we have the same situation where Parker, he grabs a knife and he's going to stab the facehugger. Here, she picks up the mining drill, right? That weaponized tool. A lot of the weapons in Alien were homemade, as it were, or they were borrowed from the work site. Or in Alien Isolation, there was that wonderful little note that said, "Don't weaponize the fucking tools." Here, the protagonist picks up a tool in the same sense that Parker did, the knife, and she's ready to blast the eggs. Like Ash, Hicks has to persuade her not to do it, except she's doing it from this bubble, whereas Ash did it in the room.
No, touch it!
Also, you have the dog here. The dog doesn't really do anything, but I like that they included the dog. So instead of a cat like Jonesy, they have a dog. And it belongs to, or is in the vicinity of, the android. So it has a different kind of effect almost. Does the android like the dog? It's not, do androids dream of electric sheep, but can an android have a doggo? Thought-provoking stuff.
But if they're dangerous, we
Look, we don't know what they'll do, right?
Similar type of logic to Ash.
I mean, but the time it takes to get there, they'll know if it's a warning or not, yes?
And to a certain extent, she has a point. She's lying a little bit because something tells me she knows exactly what would happen, but she's presenting it in such a way to confuse.
I'll notify the company. For now, I'm clearing the mine. It's the safest option.
Oh, I love that lighting. And again, it's very much a part of the shot. There were certain other short films released thus far that had instances of this, but here it's very wide and sweeping. It's not something that's out of frame or off camera. Like, you have this big fucking strobe light sort of thing that's rotating like a beacon and cutting through the darkness. It's wonderful. Oh, look at that.
Let's get Al out of here.
First I thought she said, let's get the hell out of here.
Get the hell out of here!
She said, let's get Al out of here. They're going to take the body. As the light rotates, you can hear a sound effect of sorts, a pulsating. Kind of reminds me in Aliens where you had the device that was used by the salvage team to search the inside of the narcissist. When the light passed in front of the camera, it created this sort of whooshing sound. Here, when the light, the strobe light or the beacon, the security beacon rotates, it creates sort of a clicking sound. It's just a way to keep things engaging from an audio-visual sense. Oh, it's Hanks. Okay, so it's not Hicks. Now here, Hyperdyne Systems.
Was it an older model?
Yeah, the Hyperdyne System's 128.2.
Well, that explains it, and the A2s always were a bit twitchy.
This is an A3, so it's a different model, but it's the same kind of idea, and it's a clue tying back to that conversation in Aliens. Synthetic Safety Officer. So if you're not paying attention, I wasn't paying attention, and I didn't notice Synthetic Safety Officer. So she's an android, and she's communicating to the company at this point. But she's a little bit different than Ash, so maybe she's not like Ash? Doubtful, given that there are certain clues already that suggest her agenda for the company. Also note that she's typing calmly. She's typing calmly, almost doing it at a leisurely pace. Furthermore, she goes over to the door here. And I didn't have a chance to explain what she's doing because it doesn't happen in that shot, but she locks the door. Here, note how this man is surrounded by darkness and the ambiance of the scene, but also the pulsating beacon. All of this is occurring in a way that is largely obfuscating. Like, you have a sense that something is happening, but you can't really say what. But you can see the character in the middle of it all. Wonderful use of slime, the way it drips on his helmet. He touches the rim of his cap and pulls his hand away, holding the slime. Spunkmeyer did that. Dallas did it in The Great. Axel from Alien Isolation, who did it right before he got brutally murdered. And if you are familiar with the franchise, you know that's going to happen to this guy too. But it's a little bit tragic because he's the guy, I think anyways, this is the guy who is getting ready to ship out.
Oh man, I was getting short. 4 more weeks and out. Now I'm gonna bite on this rock.
So you know something about this character before he dies.
Hey guys? What?
Oh, see, that made me jump a little bit. Like the use of sound effects and pacing. Like, it sets you up to let you know that something dangerous is probably going to happen to someone, but you can't say exactly from which direction. And it's occurring to someone that you know enough about to at least respond to. And just the timing of the loud sort of explosion and the cut to the protagonist's face and the blood on her face, like Lambert during the Last Supper sequence. There's a lot of different things occurring very quickly here that really help sell the shot.
We gotta get out. We gotta go to the clock. Come on. Go. We gotta go.
Like, they just drop everything and run. And she touches her face and realizes there's blood on it. And her first instinct is to run, but also to look after her crew. She's the mama bear. Then they cut to Hanks in the bubble, and she locks the door. Notice that she's not trying to escape at this point. Now, you could say that she's locking herself in to be able to communicate the message no matter what, but there's just something strange about her behavior compared to the other people who are trying to get away, trying to escape. She very obviously is not. I also like there's just a lot of things going on here, but you have the semiotic standard and these things on the wall, I'm not sure what they are, that mirrors that sort of symbol key system that Ron Cobb designed for use on board the Nostromo. Also, you have the dog barking at the monitor. Reminds me of a deleted scene from Aliens where Ripley is sitting in front of a screen with nature imagery, but in the commentary, James Cameron described that originally they wanted to have the cat there and they would give away the fact that it was the screen by the cat pawing at the false image. Whereas here, we have a dog that's kind of barking at the monitor. How would a dog behave in a situation like this? Now we know.
Lorraine, what happened?
Again, notice how she walks. She walks very robotically, slowly, her hands at her sides. She's not panicking. She doesn't have like a danger pose, like she's ready to run at a moment's notice. She's almost like a statue. Whereas the dog here is wigging out, this organic animal, ready to attack, like it's on edge, and she's not. Also, she's not entirely on screen. Reminds me a little bit of Michael Myers in a slasher film like Halloween, where he's not all there. He's so tall that he disappears out of the frame. And so does Hanks, that is. I like this because she asks what's going on, and she gets a response while the characters are running. Again, as the action and events of the scene itself unfold, they're able to explain what's going on in a way that makes sense. So it's not exposition. They don't have some narrative overdub, but they don't stop to say things. They say it on the run. I love this. The big difference between the short films up to this point and this one is that we actually get an adult xenomorph. And it's kind of cool because here's where it gets really important to film things in a particular way. The special effects are going to be subpar, right? If you look at them long enough, you can tell that it's a guy in a suit. Well, here we have a more modern equivalent of that, where you have the xenomorph is not a guy in a suit, it's a cartoon. Right? It's a computer-generated image. And she tries to whack it with her axe, and then it jumps away from her. And you see just enough of the image to sort of catch it without being able to stare at it. Instead, all you have is darkness. All you have is her helmet light, effectively.
Where is it? Hanks, get the lights back on.
It's in darkness, so you can see it jumping from one wall to the other, but you only catch a glimpse of it. And I'm staring at this right now, and I can't see the creature. And I can only see an outline of the girl with the axe, and she's running away from it at this point, but we can't see what she's running away from, and that's important if the special effects aren't really that good.
Where?
She says it's there, and the girl with the axe can't see what it is, so she has to have someone else point it out. Very similar to Hudson and Hicks. Right? Because Hudson can't see what's going on, and Hicks, from his vantage point, is able to catch a glimpse of the creature before it attacks. Very similar situation here. They're in this dark room. only one of them has a weapon, but in this case it's inverted because the person with the weapon can't see, so the protagonist has to point it out, and while all of this is going on, someone is listening in from elsewhere. In Aliens, it was Gordon. Here, it's Hanks, the synthetic science officer. I love this, where you can hear what's going on, and you can't see it from the monitor that she's looking at even. You can only hear it through her headset, and her facial expressions really have to sell the shot, except the way that they do is an android's facial expressions, right? But you can hear what's going on. You can see her respond as an android would, as someone who's in a bubble. They're separate from what's going on, but they can listen in. And she does such a good job, very convincing. But also, you'll notice that the woman hits the Xenomorph with the axe. You can hear it. I got it! You had Rosie from Alien Covenant, who kills one of the neomorphs in that film after it kills Anchor by knocking off his jaw. She shoots it and she says, I got it. You know, there's action that's occurring that you can sort of listen into. In that film, it was us, the audience, listening in. Here, it's diegetic, where Hanks is listening in. And the circumstances are inverted. They're a little bit different. It's an axe this time, instead of an assault rifle or a shotgun. What happens if you hit a Xenomorph with an axe? You can hear it more than you can see it. And in this case, we don't know where she hit it, but we can see that she must have got a pretty good blow because the axe head is completely immersed in blood, but it's melting. She screams into the darkness and someone behind her pulls her away. Hicks, Vasquez, that kind of situation. There's combat occurring, but it's in a situation where everything's dark. Oh, it's great.
Hanks, you in there? Hanks, you broken?
Good, come on up.
All of this is occurring in a way that you have to interpret from moment to moment.
What are you doing? All right, let's go!
Right now, this thing is sealed in. If we go up, it follows us to the colony.
And her motivations as a character are maternal, right? She's protecting everyone else. What would happen if instead of a space trucker you had a space miner and they did have an option of escaping, right? They can all get away. Well, they still have to deal with the creature. They can fight back because they're not in outer space. They're in a mine shaft, but the creature can be wounded as illustrated earlier on.
My family's up there.
Lorraine, come back up.
With the colony in danger? No. No.
I like this too because other people are upset, but just as earlier when they were laughing at each other's jokes, here there's a sense of camaraderie in terms of the conflict that they have. They know that the protagonist is right, and you can see it on their faces. It's using their faces to communicate something quickly through the imagery versus them all having a line of dialogue. They don't all have a line of dialogue, or if they do, it's communicated all at once, overlapping dialogue. That's another nice touch.
I have to stop it.
Come back up. They'll give you the finder's bonus.
Ah, the carrot, right? The bonus fee. And here you can see that she's even smiling a little bit. There's almost this demonic kind of glee on her face, but it's very subtle because, again, she's an android. She's channeling her Ian Holm or her Michael Fassbender here. Like it's there, but it's very, very faint.
But only if it stays alive.
Quid pro quo, in other words. And It's an appeal to their fiscal interests versus their emotions. She, the protagonist, is appealing to this group of people as a human would. Look, guys, it's not about the money, it's about our families. That's more important than what the company is going to offer you instead. But they don't say it like that, it unfolds like a conversation. And you can see that android's proposal doesn't go over quite as well as the protagonist's does. It doesn't seem like it's quite as tempting. Though you could understand why they would be tempted, They could try and make a run for it, get the bonus, and get the hell out of Dodge. But it's a risk.
Whose safety are you more concerned about, ours or its?
I like that she doesn't have a response to that. She calls her out on it, and she doesn't respond at this point. A void comp test, if you will, where confronted with a very human sort of problem, she isn't able to respond. She just sort of stares. And through that lack of a response, the human characters, you can see it in their faces. They're all able to figure out for themselves, this is what we need to do. Also, she's holding a pickaxe, so kind of foreshadows what happens next here.
Lorraine, leave it.
Instead of arguing with them at this point, the android orders them to, right? Do what I tell you. She's the science officer. Anything that has to do with the science division, Hanks has the final say.
Since when is that standard procedure?
Standard procedure is to do what the hell they tell you to do.
Well...
Fuck you, Hanks.
I love that shot, right? Because you have the protagonist on the screen, but as the screen cuts out, behind that image is the reflection of Hanks, who's staring at us through the mirror. Wonderful. Just wonderfully done. Also, in the same shot, I might add, while you have lights reflecting on the monitors from the background, you have the entire order, published by Hanks, Weyland-Yutani Corporation, alert, in sector whatever, organism detected. To Hanks, priority 1, ensure safety of organism. All other considerations secondary. Oh, it's beautiful. I love it. Also, the beeping, right? The underlying sort of disappearing and reappearing for emphasis. Also, when it beeps, you can see this little indicator light here. There's just little like technical things that they do that just add a little bit of extra detail to things. As it beeps, this turns on and off, but there's also a sound effect. So there's just more going on, but not in a way that feels crowded, but appropriate. That loud siren, the kind that you would hear in, say, Mark Streitenfeld's score for Prometheus, also in the trailers.
It's moving. These things moving.
They do that here. This is the final moment, right? You have this musical sort of keynote that plays. I love that shot. Like there's some really nicely photographic moments here that mirror the kind of action that would occur in Aliens. Notice she marches off by herself. She's leading the charge. She's spearheading the attack. And that dilemma is whether or not she's going to have backup in this moment. Are the other members of the human crew going to have a heart? They're still in the elevator. They could leave her behind. Also, the shot where she's in the center of things, like the other woman was earlier, but she's backlit, and that light overhead is continually spinning. And then she looks into the void, into the tunnel, and this time you have a beacon in front of her, but the tunnel itself is deep and dark, and she's staring into it with her insufficient little lamp. Now, here you can kind of tell that the creature is somewhat digital, even in the shadows, but you still can't see it very well. It comes out of the darkness, out of the actual, photographic darkness, but the image is somewhat concealed by what they're looking at. Also, it stands up in a way that the alien did in Alien. You don't really have it shown in such a way to reveal that the alien is walking on two legs. During the attack on Lambert and Parker, the alien is walking towards them, and it's walking towards them slowly. In Alien Covenant, a lot of people who had issues with the film pointed out the fact that the alien walks on 2 feet, and it looks kind of silly. But I think the reason it looks silly is because of the way it was lit, and the way that it was shot, where you can see the alien walking around like a person. To be fair, I thought that it was pretty well done for what it was. It just needed to be lit or framed in such a way. Here, I think they've done a much better job than even Alien Covenant did. But it's accomplished using special effects and things in a way that was attempted in Alien Covenant. It's just done better here. I love that shot, right? Where you can see her and she's scared, and then you don't see people just walking behind her, but they walk in from off camera. And you realize that they made the decision. But they're not running away. They're going to kill this thing and thwart the designs of the company. In Alien, they were all just employees for the company. Not so here. They're employees for the company, but there are other employees up top that they know that they care about as people. Daughter, granddaughters, people on the surface that they're trying to protect in a way that didn't really exist in Alien. Okay, so she has some kind of device. She does as well. I'm not sure what it is. He's got an axe. He's got a pickaxe. This motley crew of survivors are squaring off against one Xenomorph. So I think I count 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Looks like 8 different helmets. 8 survivors versus the 9th passenger, as it were. Now, okay, this does look cartoonish, but it's not bad. It's still kind of dark. It's an image that they've at least attempted to try and blend in with the photography itself. Okay, and the final showdown occurs off camera, and I think it works. It works really well, and I don't really have a problem with anything about this short film compared to the others, where you would have a short film that was too well lit, or there's no monster on screen at all. There's no action even. There's just nothing really happening. There's minimal dialogue, or the characters are just sitting around talking in a single room. Here, there's so much variety in terms of above, below, off-planet, on-planet, really wonderful transitions. There's just so many things going on, and this is, it's just perfect. The attention to sound design and editing and transitions from one scene to the next, sound effects, props, the actors. This feels above and beyond the others in terms of everything coming together as a cohesive Alien experience. We got the protagonist, we got the villain. We have parallels to older entries in the franchise. We have a warrior Xenomorph. Alright, we have a fully developed alien creature. And a conflict of sorts, a narrative conflict where they set the table, they move to the end, right? They have different instances of what's going on, that by the film's end, the conflict has concluded. There are no loose ends, really. It's very satisfying. So, all things considered, this is easily my favorite short film. I just want to see if there's anything else here. Okay, so in this case, the music doesn't really change all that much from the music that you heard throughout the rest of the film. So it's not like Alien where they have Howard Hanson's Romantic Symphony No. 2 or anything like that. So tonally, like from a sonic perspective, it's very consistent from beginning to end. Okay, Xeno, suit performer, right? This was a guy in a suit. This wasn't a cartoon. I imagine when it's jumping from wall to wall, that's purely cartoons, right? It's not like in Aliens where they have the Xenomorph jumping from wall to wall and they use wires. It seems like the speed and rate at which that was occurring, that was completely digital, but in the final scene, when the alien's walking out of the darkness and towards the camera, that's visually touched up in a similar way that it was in Alien Covenant. It's sort of a modern approach to an old kind of situation. I like that. You know, it's not bad. Is it perfect? No. For all intents and purposes, for a short film, it was actually really well done as far as all of that goes. The digital touch-ups are great, whereas in some of the other short films, you don't even have a face hugger. It's entirely off screen at all moments, and when you do see it, it looks really hokey and fake. Here, they clearly had a budget with that kind of thing. I don't know if these all cost the same, but it seems like with this, they had more resources, and it shows on different levels. That's my thoughts and feelings on this. If you like these videos and the content on my YouTube channel, like, share, and subscribe. If you want to get a hold of me, you can leave a comment, of course, but I'll also leave my Twitter in the description below, and you can send me a message on there. It's the best way to get a hold of me if you have something you want to tell me about either my YouTube videos or my blog reviews, any of my output that I produce. So yeah, guys, thanks for watching. This is easily the best short film yet. I believe it is short film number 5. There's 1 or 2 left that have yet to be shown. And if they're anywhere near as good as this one, I would be over the moon. This short film hangs the moon. You know, it really does an awesome job. So I'm hoping that the last 1 or 2 short films are just as good as it. It's certainly the best of the ones that they've shown thus far. Not that I didn't mind those, but I thought that this one, just on all of the different levels and different things that I've talked about and what it tries to do as a short film, it works easily the best. So yeah, that's it, guys. Thanks for watching, and stay tuned for more content. If I have a chance to watch these other short films as they release and I like them as much, I will do a video on them as well. If not, I do plan on doing a video or a review discussing all of them, basically comparing them from which ones I like the most to which ones I like the least. So stay tuned for that as well, and until then, take care.